Hollywood doesn't crucify actors literally, but sometimes, metaphorically, it does exactly that. Jim Caviezel received a phone call in 2002. Mel Gibson was on the line. The director had an offer, the kind that changes everything. Not a blockbuster superhero franchise, not a romantic lead opposite a rising starlet. No, Gibson wanted Caviezel to play Jesus Christ in what would become the Passion of the Christ. Caviezel said yes immediately. Hours later, Gibson called back. This time the tone was different, urgent, almost desperate. He begged Caviezel to reconsider. "You'll never work in this town again," Gibson warned. The director knew what he was asking. He knew the cost. He'd seen it happen before, actors who attached themselves too closely to faith, to controversy, to truth. They became untouchable, but Caviezel had already decided. "We all have to embrace our crosses," he told Gibson. "Jesus is as controversial now as he has ever been. Not much has changed in 2,000 years." This wasn't bravado. It was a surrender. Caviezel understood that accepting the role meant accepting rejection. That playing Christ meant becoming an outcast. That his career, his reputation, his place in Hollywood, all of it could vanish. And he said yes anyway, before the lightning strike, before the blood and the whip. Before his name became synonymous with sacrifice, Jim Caviezel was simply an actor trying to make it. Born in Mount Vernon, Washington, he grew up in a devout Catholic family. Faith wasn't something he discovered later in life. It was the foundation he stood on from the beginning. He moved to Seattle, worked on stage, and earned his Screen Actors Guild card with a minor role in My Own Private Idaho in 1991. Los Angeles came next. Small parts, television episodes. Murder, She Wrote. The Wonder Years. Then came Warren Earp in Wyatt Earp. Larger roles followed: G.I. Jane, The Thin Red Line, Frequency, The Count of Monte Cristo. He was building something, a career, a future. He was on the rise. Hollywood liked him. Casting directors saw potential. He had the face, the talent, the trajectory of someone who could become an A-list star. Everything was unfolding the way it was supposed to. Then came the call about playing Jesus. Caviezel wasn't naive. He knew what accepting meant. Gibson had spelled it out. Career suicide. But for Caviezel, the decision wasn't about career calculations. It was about something deeper. Something that couldn't be measured in box office returns or award nominations. "We have to give up our names, our reputations, our lives to speak the truth," he would later say. So he chose the cross. And the cross chose him back. Filming began in Italy. It was winter. Most actors complain about uncomfortable costumes or long hours under hot lights. Caviezel's discomfort was of a different magnitude entirely. He performed scene after scene wearing almost nothing, just a loincloth, in freezing winds. His body temperature dropped. He developed hypothermia, then pneumonia. Doctors monitored him constantly. Between takes, crew members wrapped him in thermal blankets. They gave him something warm to drink. He would recover just enough to return to the set. Because every shot mattered. Every frame was a prayer. The makeup process alone took up to 8 hours daily. Silicone sheets applied to his skin. Blood. Dirt. Dust. More blood. Every inch of his body covered in a layer that simulated suffering. The special contact lenses irritated his eyes constantly. He could barely see. The thick makeup blocked his pores, making it difficult to breathe. He lost weight because eating became nearly impossible, with his mouth constantly dry and his face encased in prosthetics. Caviezel learned all his dialogue phonetically in ancient Aramaic and Latin, languages he didn't speak. He repeated phrases 100 times, not just as lines, but as prayers. There was no room for falsehood. Any mistake felt like sacrilege. Mel Gibson demanded maximum realism. "I'm not filming a parable," he told the cast. "I'm filming the truth." And truth, it turned out, required blood. During one scene, something went wrong. An actor dressed as a Roman soldier was supposed to simulate the scourging of Christ. The whip in his hand was real. It had to look authentic on camera. But in the chaos of the moment, in the intensity of the performance, the actor made a mistake. The whip struck Caviezel's back. Not simulated, not held back. The full force connected with his flesh, tearing a 14-inch gash across his back. The camera kept rolling. Caviezel's pain was real. His reaction was real. The blood seeping through the makeup was real. And Gibson knew immediately, this was the take. This was the moment of genuine suffering he'd been trying to capture. That footage made it into the final film. Audiences watching The Passion of the Christ in theaters around the world saw actual pain. They saw a man being wounded, not acting wounded. Caviezel later said he understood there was a price to pay. That God was allowing him the privilege, including severe pain, of suffering with Christ in what he did for mankind on the cross. Privilege. He called it a privilege. Between takes, Caviezel stopped speaking to those around him. He moved through the set in silence. Not the silence of someone conserving energy, but the silence of someone living in a different realm. He wasn't playing Jesus anymore. He was carrying something heavier than a character. He was bearing a weight that separated him from everyone else. Some days, the crew couldn't tell where the actor ended and the figure of Christ began. The lightning came without warning. They were filming a sermon scene on a mountaintop. The sky had darkened. Clouds gathered thick and heavy. Caviezel stood at the highest point, his arms spread, delivering lines in ancient Aramaic. Then the air crackled. A massive bolt of lightning struck directly into his body. Everyone watching thought he was dead. The force threw him down. His body convulsed. Smoke rose from where the lightning had entered. The smell of burned hair filled the air. But he wasn't dead. He woke in shock, disoriented, his skin singed, his mind trying to process what had just happened. He later described hearing a crack, feeling his hair stand on end, and for a moment, just a moment, experiencing something he couldn't fully explain. An out-of-body experience. A glimpse of something beyond. The crowd of extras who had been standing before the cross during another scene witnessed something even more extraordinary. When lightning struck the cross, Caviezel hung on. They saw him illuminated. His face lit up. A bright light shone around the cross, especially brilliant around his head. The entire crowd fell to their faces. This wasn't special effects. This wasn't planned. This was something else. Something that left everyone present shaken, changed, unable to explain what they'd witnessed. The lightning wasn't the only supernatural occurrence on set. Equipment malfunctioned constantly. Cameras shut off without cause. Microphones picked up sounds that shouldn't have been there. Some crew members quit, saying there was something wrong with the film, something they couldn't name, but could feel. Caviezel felt it too. He prayed constantly, not out of duty, but because it was impossible to do otherwise. The cross itself was a weapon. It was built to be historically accurate, which meant it was massive and unbearably heavy. During the scenes where Christ carries the cross, Caviezel's shoulder dislocated under the weight. The pain was excruciating. But the camera was rolling. The light was perfect. The scene had to be captured. So he continued. To make the crucifixion scenes convincing, Gibson insisted on securing Caviezel to the cross with medical pins. They sewed his clothing, and in some places his skin, to the wooden beams to prevent him from slipping during the moment of impact when the cross was raised. When they lifted him, the tension from the straps caused such intense pain that he nearly lost consciousness. His body hung in an unnatural position, his heart constricted from the stretching. A doctor listened to his heart with a stethoscope and warned both Caviezel and Gibson, if they continued, he could die. Caviezel insisted they continue. The filming of the crucifixion lasted days. Each take was physical torture. The cold, the wind, the weight of his own body pulling against dislocated joints, covered wounds, blood, flies landing on his face while he hung immobile. They nailed him to the cross again and again. The nails were fake, but the metal pressure on his hands was real. His skin abraded, his wrists swelled. One of Gibson's assistants later said, "I've seen actors suffer, but what Jim did was martyrdom. He truly crucified himself." Doctors repeatedly warned that continuing was dangerous, but Caviezel refused to stop. "As long as I feel pain," he said, "I'm in character. As soon as it becomes easy, I will lose the truth." The truth was visible in every frame. The camera didn't need special effects. His look, his voice, the trembling of his hands, everything was genuine. This wasn't a performance. This was a man who had endured cold, pain, lightning, and loneliness, who had given up his career in exchange for faith. When filming ended, Caviezel no longer looked like an actor. His eyes were sunken, his face gaunt, his body exhausted. He spoke in whispers. His fingers trembled. He barely ate. Some said he fasted consciously to achieve the degree of exhaustion Christ must have felt. He didn't complain. "It's not me," he said. "It's the path." But the path had changed him. Not just physically. Something deeper had shifted. He moved differently, thought differently, lived differently. After playing Christ, he couldn't return to who he had been before. The film wrapped. Post-production began. And slowly, Caviezel began to realize the full consequences of what he'd done. Gibson's warning had been prophetic. Hollywood didn't want him anymore. The studios that had once seen him as rising talent now saw him as a liability. Too religious, too controversial, too associated with Christian fanaticism. His image had become too heavy, too uncomfortable, too unprofitable. The offers stopped coming. The calls from agents became less frequent. Projects he would have been perfect for went to other actors, younger faces, lighter associations, people without scars. After The Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel nearly disappeared from the radar. He wasn't offered leading roles. He no longer appeared in high-profile projects. His trajectory, which had been rising steadily upward, flatlined. Others took his place in the Hollywood hierarchy. The industry moved on without him. And Caviezel? He accepted it. "It wasn't a career," he said. "It was a cross to bear." He didn't complain, didn't blame. He said it was his path, and that he would choose it again. The Passion of the Christ premiered in 2004. Critics were divided. Some called it too violent, too graphic, too religious, too strange. Others recognized it as something unprecedented, a film that didn't sanitize suffering, that didn't soften truth for comfort. The Academy ignored it almost entirely. Award season came and went. The film that had required such sacrifice, that had pushed an actor to the edge of death, that had captured something genuine and raw. Hollywood's elite turned away. But audiences didn't. The film became a global phenomenon. It grossed over $600 million worldwide, one of the highest-grossing R-rated films in history. Churches organized group viewings. People who never went to movies filled theaters. Some watched in silence, tears streaming. Others left unable to speak. They had witnessed something. Not just a film. Not just a performance. They had seen a man who had truly lived suffering on screen. Hundreds of thousands of lives changed after watching it. Many came to faith for the first time. Others, who had drifted from belief, returned. The film did what Hollywood said was impossible. It moved people toward God. Even the cast and crew weren't immune. Many actors involved in the production found themselves drawn closer to faith. Some chose to follow Christ for the first time. The experience of making the film had been a spiritual earthquake for everyone present. But most dramatically affected was Caviezel himself. He had entered the project as a committed Christian. He emerged as something more, a reluctant evangelist, a witness, a man whose body had become part of the story he was telling. He didn't seek that role. It sought him. After the film, Jim Caviezel's life took an unexpected turn. Hollywood had rejected him, but people hadn't. He began receiving invitations, not to auditions or premieres, but to conferences, church events, private screenings, places where people wanted to hear not about acting technique, but about faith. Not about Hollywood, but about meaning. He became a speaker, moving audiences to tears with his testimony. Watching him address thousands, you could see the weight he carried. This wasn't a celebrity basking in fame. This was a man marked by what he'd experienced. He spoke about sacrifice, about suffering, about the cost of following Christ. His words carried authority because they weren't theoretical. He had lived them. His body bore the evidence, the scars, the damage from hypothermia and pneumonia, the memory of lightning and dislocation. When he pleaded with audiences to follow Jesus, to love one another as Christ loves them, he became emotional, raw. There was no performance in it. This was a man who had been broken and remade. In interviews, he remained philosophical about his career. "I would rather be an unknown down here and have my name up there," he said, pointing upward. On the 700 Club, he told Pat Robertson, "We have to give up our names, our reputations, our lives to speak the truth." He lived that principle. He had given up his name in Hollywood, given up his reputation as a rising star, given up the comfortable life of an A-list actor. And in return, he had gained something Hollywood could never offer, a purpose beyond himself. The industry had cast him out, but he had found a different audience, a different calling. He continued acting in smaller projects. He played John Reese in the CBS series Person of Interest, Finding Success in Television. But everyone knew that his legacy wasn't built on roles that came after the passion. It was built on the one role he chose when it cost him everything. There's a moment in The Passion of the Christ where Caviezel's Jesus looks directly at the camera. His face is bloodied, beaten beyond recognition. His eyes, barely open through the swelling, hold something that can't be acted. Pain, yes, but also resolve, also love, also a terrible, beautiful acceptance. That look wasn't created in a makeup trailer. It was earned through pneumonia and hypothermia, through lightning strikes and dislocated shoulders, through hours hanging on an actual cross, feeling actual pain, breathing actual prayers. Jim Caviezel didn't just play Jesus. He walked through a version of the suffering. Not to the same degree, he would be the first to say that. But far enough to understand something. Far enough to be changed forever. When Mel Gibson first offered him the role, Caviezel could have said no. He could have chosen safety, chosen career advancement, chosen the path that made sense by Hollywood standards. Instead, he chose the cross. Not metaphorically, literally. He allowed himself to be nailed to it, lifted on it, to suffer on it. And in doing so, he lost what Hollywood valued: fame, status, the next big role. But he gained what Hollywood could never give: the knowledge that he had done something true, something that mattered beyond box office numbers or critical acclaim. Years after the film, Caviezel continues to say he would make the same choice again. The cost was high. The suffering was real. The rejection continues. But some crosses are meant to be carried. Some suffering has purpose. Some sacrifices echo beyond the moment they're made. Jim Caviezel's story isn't about an actor who played Jesus. It's about a man who was willing to be crucified for it, who knew the cost and paid it anyway, who understood that following Christ sometimes means losing everything the world says matters. And in losing it, finding what actually does. The film changed hundreds of thousands of lives, but perhaps no life was changed more than the man who hung on that cross, struck by lightning, abandoned by Hollywood, yet somehow, impossibly, at peace. Because he had made his choice, and the choice had made him. "I would rather be an unknown down here and have my name up there." He said it. He lived it. He became it. The cross he chose became the cross that chose him. And that, more than any performance, is his legacy.